Naughty word.
What is a tariff?
It's a treaty.
It's not a treaty. Yes.
So like,
That might be an excise tax.
Tax on a certain country.
It's certainly a tariff. Okay, so a tariff is a tax on imports. Tariff is a tax on imports. And why can I say with confidence that tariffs end up making every product more expensive, whether made overseas or here? Explain to me that logic.
American makes these products more expensive.
Very good. So what will happen is the American manufacturer will raise his or her prices still below the import, but cheaper than the import. Everything becomes more expensive. What's that called again? When prices go up, it's called inflation. And as a result, what economic group doesn't like tariffs? Economic group, there's manufacturers, there's producers, there's consumer. Very good. Are there consumers in the northern part of the United States? Yes. Are there consumers in the southern part of the United States? Yes. And yet one region of the country clearly disliked tariffs more than the other. Why?
They don't have city laws.
Well, yeah, but what? Okay, all right. Well, no, you're right. Of course, there are consumers everywhere, and no consumer likes to pay more. But at least in the north, the tariff did, at least it was perceived to benefit the north because tariffs made imports more expensive. As a result, more Americans buy domestic products. Yes, it's more expensive, but at least those factories in the north could end up hiring more workers. There are no factories in the south. Very few, very few. There's like one metal factory in the entire south, target of the Civil War. Anyway, tariffs had been around since the United States had begun. This is the latest version. Tariffs were renewed. This tariff was the tariff of 1828, but it became known as something else, the tariff of abominations. A tariff so evil, so vile, that... What's an abomination? I'll tell you what an abomination is. Look in the mirror. What's an abomination? Is it a good thing? If you walked up to Miss Donnelly and said, "Hey, Miss Donnelly, you're an abomination," would she say, "Oh, thanks. I like you too"? No, an abomination is an awful thing. Have we in this class studied another thing that had a name but then was renamed? The answer is yes.
Yes.
Do you remember? You don't remember. Do you remember the Intolerable Acts? They were not called the Intolerable Acts. They were a series of laws that the Americans called the Intolerable Acts. Same thing. This was not called the Tariff of Abominations. It was called the Tariff of 1828. But the South called it the Tariff of Abominations. It didn't like it. It benefited the South not at all. They needed a champion, someone who would verbalize Southern opposition, and they got one. That guy.
I'm so confused.
Look at him. I mean, that's the painting on the wall of the haunted house, and no matter where you stand, he's looking at you. Give it a try. I mean, right now, he's looking at me. No matter where you stand, he's looking at me. He is looking at me right now. Okay, it's a scary guy. Look at that hair. I don't suppose anyone recognizes who this is. I'd be surprised if you did. That's John C. Calhoun.
I don't know what that is.
John C. Calhoun was the vice president when Jackson was president.
John
C. Calhoun. Vice president when Jackson was president. So just a reminder here, who did it help? What region of the country? And do you know why?
Cities.
No, not cities. Why though?
Because people were buying their products, they could use.
Okay, so factories that made the products that Americans ended up purchasing. Okay, who did it hurt? Consumers everywhere, but especially Southern consumers. But because yes, they paid more, so did the North. But at least the North got the benefit of increased demand. Factories hire more people. There are no factories in the South, so regionally it helps the North, it hurts the South. This was the leading opponent of this tariff. It passes in 1828. Jackson was elected president in 1828, which means Jackson's the one enforcing it. You've got the vice president opposing it. Andrew Jackson is a Democrat. Pray tell, will someone remind me? Democrats, were they conservative or liberal back then? They were conservative, which means, what is the conservative viewpoint of things like taxes? Hooray or boo hiss? Boo hiss, that's right. That should tell you that Jackson, because he was a Democrat, the Democrats were the conservative party, and the conservative party booed his taxes, that as a result, mathematical equation, if Jackson is a Democrat, and if Democrats are conservative, and if conservatives are opposed to taxes, Jackson should be opposed to taxes, right? He should be opposed to this tariff, right? But he wasn't. He wasn't. Have we in this class should have had a position of A, but instead actually had a position of B? You remember? Jefferson, that's right. Jefferson, who as a conservative was not comfortable with the very fact that he authorized the purchase of Louisiana because he was a conservative, he interpreted the Constitution strictly, could find no justification for what he did, but he did it anyway. As a conservative, opposed the national bank, but kept it anyway. That's what Jackson did. Jackson was not a nutcase conservative. Jackson was, well, let's try and figure out what Jackson was. Okay, I compared Jackson to Trump yesterday. I will continue to do that. Trump is a Republican today, and Republicans are conservative. As a result, Trump is conservative. Yes? Did you follow that logic? Conservatives today are opposed to taxes, like tariffs. And yet, Trump imposed tariffs on China. Trump is like Jackson. You're supposed to be this, but for some reason you're that. This and that. Let's try and figure out why. Okay, so Calhoun led the fight against the tariff, and two ideas he supported. He said South Carolina should nullify that tariff. Here we go again. It's the same argument as the Alien and Sedition Act. But wait, didn't we settle this question with the Alien and Sedition Act? Hasn't this situation been resolved? States cannot nullify federal laws, right? Did the Sedition Act settle the question? If not, why not? Yeah, the laws simply died off before the answer to that question of can states nullify federal laws. They died before that question could be answered. So it was not answered. So here we are again, decades later, and here we go again. Can a state nullify a federal law? And South Carolina went further. They said, we are aware that the Army can be now used to enforce laws. If one soldier enters South Carolina, we're going to secede. We're going to secede. Okay, Andrew Jackson, your move.
What is this thing?
Leave the Union. Quit the country. Okay? Error here. This should say federal. If the federal government, so this is Calhoun's logic. My God, if the federal government can determine what's legal or illegal in a state, then what's to stop the federal government from making slavery illegal in the South? What could stop them? He ends up resigning. This is a vice president resigning. Kind of a big deal. you would expect Jackson to agree with him. He's a conservative. He's a Democrat. Democrats were conservative. Conservatives oppose taxes. But he didn't. He didn't. He said South Carolina had to pay that tax. In this situation, he's a federal governmentist. It doesn't work. He's a nationalist. There you go. He's a nationalist. He sides with the idea of the nation over the rights of states. Calhoun says, no, states are primary. Jackson says, no, the federal government is primary. So we seem to have a situation here. We seem to have a situation. The tariff is the law of the land. South Carolina passes a nullification act. We're not doing it. And if you send soldiers, we're out. We'll secede. What do? Do we simply allow South Carolina to ignore the law? Because you know what will happen? If you allow South Carolina to ignore that law? What do you think? Other states will say, well, we're not paying it either then. So what do? This is a crisis, a true crisis. In fact, it's called the nullification crisis. It's called the nullification crisis. The state of South Carolina nullified that tariff. Said, we're not paying it. This song just makes me want to dance. Let's just enjoy this. It's 3 beats. Or 4. Or 3. Okay. I made this myself.
I like the banana.
Okay, so here we go. This is how it was resolved. Nullification crisis. That big guy, that's Andrew Jackson. And he sends the army. Those are heads. Okay? Where does he send them? South Carolina. Because as you remember, there was this thing called the Force Act, which authorized the president to use the army to enforce the law. Not fight Indians, not defend the borders, but enforce the law. And there in South Carolina, they collect the tariffs. See, the tariff I have as these gray boxes, and they put it in this box called tariffs. They're collecting the tariff.
How long did it take you to do this?
Minutes. I know. It's so real. You think you're looking at actual people. Nope, that's a black circle with a stick. Right. Well, South Carolina says, you better get those soldiers out or we're seceding. We need a hero. Enter Henry Clay. Henry Clay comes along, and what Henry Clay was really good at, seriously, what he honestly was good at was saying, all right, what will you settle for? What will you settle for? And he gets a compromise that both sides can live with. And so Henry Clay gets a compromise bill passed. The tariff was lowered. Now, who's happy about that?
South.
Very good. The South, right? South Carolina. The score is South Carolina 1, federal government 0. It's 1-0. The tariff was lowered. But wait. Are you sure it's 1-0 South? Because you'll notice something. I tell you the tariff was lowered. What could you say in response to me, though? Yeah, but
Doesn't mean it's gone.
it doesn't mean it's gone. It still exists. It still exists. Have we in this class studied previous situations where the power gets rid of most of it, but keeps one thing? Does that sound familiar? The British, exactly. They got rid of the taxes on 4 of the 5 products that they were taxing, but they kept that one. Very good, the tea. And of course, the Americans were all happy about that. Like, great! We're so happy the British did that, right? No, they're like, what? You're keeping the tax on tea? Okay. The second thing was a recognition of the Force Act. Yes, we accept the idea that the soldiers can be used to enforce the law. So sort of a victory for the federal government. And then part 3, South Carolina repealed its own nullification act. So question, did the nullification crisis resolve the issue of can a state nullify a federal law? I want you to ponder while we listen to this delay. Don't you just want a pirouette?
My mom just said me.
It's really hard to tell students to stay up with phones when their own moms are tending to study their classes. Now tell me this next song, I defy you to not want to kick. Would you just want to kick?
How do you know this is coming on?
You just want to kick? Kick.
I think you should do it.
And kick.
There we go.
And this is why we don't really
See? You just want to, don't you? Kick. Take this for volleyball practice. Okay.
I'll make it again.
What was my question again?
I don't know.
Oh, did this resolve the situation? Can a state nullify a federal law? Did it answer that question?
No.
No. They kicked it down the road again. We still don't know the answer. Can a state nullify a federal law? They rescinded their own nullification attempt. So we still don't know if they legally can. We don't know yet. Another big takeaway from this is Jackson the nationalist, right? Jackson the nationalist. Let's see if that's consistent. You are now looking at a map showing the effects of something called the Indian Removal Act, IRA, Indian Removal Act. Guess what it did? Removed all Indians from? East, very good. Every Native American east of the Mississippi River was ordered by this law to move west of the Mississippi River to a chunk of land that you and I call Oklahoma. Now, back then it was called Indian land. Okay, and the U.S. government promised we'll never bother you again. Okay. Now, we could identify the Native American tribes that ended up fighting militarily against this. The Seminole of Florida, they tried to fight and they lost. And the Sauk Indians of Illinois, they tried to fight and they lost. And the Creek Indians of Alabama and Mississippi, and they lost. The Cherokee used a different strategy. The Cherokee did something that I think is actually advisable. If you're ever wronged, let's say our cop pulls you over for no reason is slightly abusive. You don't get your gun out and shoot the guy. You get your phone out and record the guy, because what you're going to do is sue him. That's what the Cherokee did. The Cherokee sued in U.S. court. The state of Georgia attempted to remove the Cherokee from this region of Georgia, and the Cherokee sued him. And when a state is sued, does anyone know what is the referee? Who is the referee? The Supreme Court. When a state is sued, it goes straight to the Supreme Court. The Cherokee made some interesting arguments. They first of all argued they weren't living like typical Indians. They did not live tribally. They owned individual plots of land. They farmed. They were mostly Christian. They spoke English. They were not people that lived in teepees and chased the buffalo. They had, in essence, abandoned Native American tribal ways. Can't we just live here? We're like you, the Cherokee said. We're like you. And the Supreme Court said, you're right. We agree with you, Cherokee. Okay? So the Supreme Court makes their decision. Who enforces Supreme Court wishes? Don't answer yet. Okay? Let's go to 1954. Brown v. Board of Education. Right now I'm synthesizing. Brown v. Board of Education. The Supreme Court orders all schools in the South to desegregate. And the Supreme Court made their decision. And then what the Supreme Court did was say, all right, you enforce our decision. Who are they talking to? No. You should know the answer. No, it's still wrong. What? The President of the United States enforces the law of the land. Whether it's a law or a Supreme Court decision. When the Supreme Court decision in 1954, the Supreme Court looked at the president in 1954. That was Eisenhower, and said, enforce this decision. It was up to Eisenhower to enforce the wishes of the Supreme Court. In the 1830s, the Supreme Court issues their decision, protect the Cherokee, leave them alone, and they turn and say, all right, you enforce this decision. Who are they talking to? Andrew Jackson, Indian killer. Andrew Jackson, who as a general took on the Seminole, as a general took on the Creek, and now he's going to protect the Cherokee? You know, does anyone know what his response was? Basically, no, I am not going to do that. He openly defied the wishes of the Supreme Court. That is unimaginable today. If the Supreme Court ordered Trump, this is actually an issue. Again, what we were doing is synthesizing. But one of the things that's probably going to happen in a couple months is the House of Representatives will ask Trump to turn over his tax returns. And when he says no, because he will, they'll say no. They will then subpoena his tax returns. They will say, you need to turn them over. The reason they couldn't do that before is because the Republicans were in control and he's their guy. But now the Democrats are in control and they're going to say, you need to turn those over. And Crystal Ball here, he's going to say, no, I'm not going to do it. So Crystal Ball, they'll go to the Supreme Court and they'll say, Supreme Court, order him to turn over his taxes. And whatever the Supreme Court says, let's just hypothetically say, you know what, Trump, turn over your taxes. It's hard to imagine him saying no to the Supreme Court. It just doesn't happen anymore. But that's what Jackson did. Jackson said, screw you, Supreme Court, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. What are you going to do? You going to reveal your secret Supreme Court army? You don't have an army. I have an army. They answer to me, not you. And so his logic, his actual phraseology, and tell me when this stops making sense, was this. Federal government can't tell Georgia what to do. Huh? Yeah,
It doesn't make sense.
it doesn't make sense. Why not?
Because federal is over, or the government is over the states.
Very good. Didn't he right here tell South Carolina, you can't defy the wishes of the federal government? And now he's saying, who are we to tell Georgia what to do? We can't do anything about it. Is he confused? Was he at the top of the stairs like, I'm a nationalist? Oh, God, dick. Fall down the stairs, hit his head several times. Ah, yeah, about states' rights. Is Jackson confused?
I just don't think.
On this slide, he's a liberal. On this slide, he's suddenly a conservative. On this slide, he says states cannot ignore the wishes of the federal government. On this slide, he says, yeah, they can. Is he confused? Let's synthesize. Trump is a Republican. Republicans are liberal. Therefore, Trump is a Republican. Republicans are conservative. Therefore, Trump is conservative, right?
Right.
And yet, it is Trump who has imposed tariffs on China. That's liberal. That's more taxes. Is Trump confused? Jefferson was a Democratic Republican. Democratic Republicans were conservative. Therefore, Jefferson is conservative. And yet Jefferson kept the national bank. Was Jefferson confused? Help me understand. Why do presidents do these things? Let's just think about this. In this situation, what did Jackson want? He wanted the tariff money. In this situation, what did Jackson want? The Indians gone. Is he confused? No, he got what he wanted. Both times. He got what he wanted. He was like, you keep your labels. You can't label me. I got what I wanted. Is that what's going on with Trump? Maybe Trump sometimes acts conservatively and sometimes acts liberally because in both situations, he gets what he wants, whatever it is. Okay. That's a little example of synthesis. Any questions? Rock on. Shifting gears. We need to really start thinking about your second essay. My goal is for you to have a rough draft first paragraph written when you walk in the door tomorrow. Okay? So I remind you of our restaurant comparing paragraph, right? I'll read it again. It's 6:30 p.m. and one Twin Cities family is starving. What will they eat? Chinese food gives daughter Julie ulcers, and the Smiths haven't gone grocery shopping in 2 weeks. The refrigerator is full of leftovers on the verge of spoiling. And that's when it hits Dad. Pizza! Patois! There are options everywhere. Look how many sentences my hook is. It's more than one. So far, everyone in here has given to me 2 pieces of writing. One was your first Blue Book essay, and one was your Lexington paper. Some of you, I think, need to push the envelope a little bit with your hook. You can go beyond who shot first. That was some of your hooks. Who shot first? That was it, right? If you were to give that paper to Mr. Schultz, would he have any idea what you were talking about? Who shot first? Where? At Kennedy? I think that one guy did. And he's like, no, at Lexington. But there was nowhere in your hook what you were talking about. What's the context, right? I've provided context. You know exactly what's going on here. So for some of you, your hook needs to be more. Okay? Let's keep going. Roadmap is where you present the possibilities. One factor in making an important decision like this would be the quality of food. Another would be the location and atmosphere of the restaurant. You now know, what is the second paragraph going to be about? What is it going to be about? Quality of food. That's right. Okay. Let's keep going. Peppers and Amante, it's the first time we've seen that, is the thesis. Peppers and Amante both offer a greater variety of ingredients than other Twin Cities restaurants. In the funky, lively atmosphere of Amante, make it a better place for visiting friends and family to taste of local culture. You'll notice that there are 2 factors and there are 2 restaurants. We are going to create a paragraph where restaurant A, factor A, restaurant A, factor B, restaurant B, factor A, restaurant B, factor B. A paragraph that goes A, B, one paragraph, A, second paragraph, AB, third paragraph, BA, fourth paragraph, BB.
I thought we were only having total.
Yes, I know. But if you were writing this paper,
But we're not writing that
that's a good point.
paper.
Very good. Think about your Zinn and Schweikert and Allen. You wrote about Zinn and Schweikert and Allen. Zinn and Schweikert and Allen, and you had 2 areas to compare, Columbus and let's just say European justification of colonization. That meant you wrote a paragraph about Zinn's view of Columbus and Zinn's view of European justification of colonization, and Schweikert and Allen's view of Columbus, and Schweikert and Allen's view of European justification of colonization. And what I suggested was you put the historians that you agree with as the 4th and 5th paragraph. The historian you disagree with as the 2nd and 3rd paragraph. Are you following me? Have I lost anyone yet? Okay.
So in the roadmap, you don't say like, you don't have to mention the peppers and mate.
You can, you don't have to, right?
So like in our paper,
There you go.
and
You're understanding. Very good. So think about this. Pepper is like the Federalists. You are comparing the views of the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. Caution, do not compare the views of Jefferson and Hamilton. Because, fun little fact, Hamilton opposed his own party with regards to the Sedition Act. The Federalists supported the Sedition Act, but Hamilton didn't. So that's why the quote that you found in those documents was not from Hamilton. It was from some other Federalist. Okay? All right. So Peppers would be like the Federalists. Amante would be like the Democratic Republicans. So all you need to do, can you start putting this together? All you need to do is every time it says Peppers, just put the word Federalists. Every time it says Amante, just put Democratic Republicans. When it says variety ingredients, that's where you put your only area of comparison. Is it going to be taxes and spending for you? Or is it going to be the attempt to limit free speech? Or is it going to be states attempting to nullify federal laws? Which one of those is going to be your issue? That's variety ingredients, right? So maybe for you, it's going to be taxes. Okay, if I had you write on 2 issues, then the atmosphere would have been whatever your second issue is, right? And that's why I say or nullification. But really, I'm going to make this even easier. Where it says variety of ingredients, is that going to be taxes for you? Or is it going to be government attempts at limiting speech for you? Or is it going to be states attempting to nullify federal laws for you? And then just take this and substitute it in to this monster, and you've got your first paragraph, kind of. Okay? So what that means is when you walk in the door tomorrow, you know what your position is, and you know what your issue is going to be. Right?
Mhm.
We won't look at it.
So we don't need no answer.
Well,
Right now, for the introduction,
What did she ask?
Depend on which topic.
It-
because it's one-
whatever you put there, what is it going to be for you? Is it going to be taxes? Is it going to be government attempts at limiting speech? Or is it going to be state attempts to nullify federal laws? Nullification. So you're going to go with that. Okay, so that Substitute the word nullification in for variety of ingredients up here. Okay. Remember now, there's only one factor, so you can eliminate this sentence. You're not having a second area of comparison.
Are we talking about the essay right now?
Take that back.
Wait, what? I'm sorry, I just feel like this is.
Take that back.
I take it back.
Okay. Yes, we are talking about your blue book essay, your second blue book essay. Okay. Take that back. Take it back.
I get so confused.
You haven't taken it back yet.
Okay, I take it back.
All right.
That makes it
All
a
right.
little better.
I like happy students.
I'm so happy.
Faking. Okay, good. So I'm going to be distributing to you now your second practice blue books.
Yay.
I know. You're happy. I know. You walk in the door tomorrow with a practice first paragraph done. How many paragraphs is this essay going to probably be? 4. It's going to be a full 1/3 shorter, as far as number of paragraphs, than the Zinn, Schweigert, and Allen one. That one was 6. This one's 4. 4 over 6. That's 2/3.
Do we talk about the paper in here or just the essays?
Well, because there are some of you that are actually kind of good at this writing thing, and so you might start a new paragraph, like a 5th paragraph, because the writing warrants it. But I don't want to confuse you. Okay, so you know who you are, those of you who are good at this writing thing.
Yeah.
But you should be looking at 4 paragraphs. Okay? And generally it's first paragraph. The second one would be the party that you're going to acknowledge the view but refute. The 3rd paragraph would be the party whose view you acknowledge and defend. And then the conclusion. Okay.
So why do we have to write it in here?
You don't have to.
Like, is this like what college people do? Right.
I feel like you don't need to write it in here now anyways because it's shorter.
Okay.
But like, why? Like,
In case, because if yours is like really long.
no,
you
I
write
know,
it-
but like, why
This
can't
is-
we just
you're-
write it and give you like our notebooks?
Because I want you to practice, right? You're like in book 2 of Harry Potter, the one
don't
girl
know
who
Harry
teaches the defense of the dark arts, and Hermione says, "What's good? What's the point of reading about the spells? We got to practice." And she, what do you need to practice for? That's you.
You just told us that this was for practice.
This is practice.
But for the
That's why we
final,
just
why do we have to write it in there? Like, why can't we just write it on a piece of regular paper?
Because it has to be a certain length.
So
Then
that
why-
someday when you go to that big bad school and they give you one
So
of
that's what
these,
colleges do.
then you'll be like, and the students around you will be like, ah, and you'll be like, yeah.
Okay, you could just say this is what colleges do.
Yes, dear.
Miss Umbridge and.
Umbridge, yeah. Book five. Okay, any other questions?
No.
You have 2 Kias due tomorrow. You've got an article on slavery that you're supposed to read for tomorrow. Probably more like Monday. Some of you have a presentation that's Monday, and you have this. So you got those 4 balls being juggled in the air.
What, you know?
3 of them.
How many kids do this?
Ooh, I have like a shock. Okay, I will be gone tomorrow, so you should just hold it off until Monday. The
What is it?
slavery thing. Just kidding. You're.
Oh, yeah,
Just
it's
kidding.
slavery is probably not going to
Where
be.
are you
But-
going?
Are we gonna start the next paragraph? Is that like your idea?
That's a good question.
Or are we gonna have more work time for our presentation?
Are we gonna have work time con vaquinas, girl?
Probably.